They called him the bastard, an insult meant to shame him, but William of Normandy would wear it like armor. In 1066, this illegitimate duke, mocked for the circumstances of his birth, would cross a stormy channel, slaughter an army, and kill a king. That king was Harold Godwinson, the last crowned Saxon ruler of England. His death would shatter a dynasty, plunge England into fire and blood, and forever change the destiny of the island. But here's the question history rarely asks. Was William simply a conqueror, or a thief who stole a kingdom with cunning, deception, and brutality? Stay with me until the end, because the answer will reveal not just how one man took the English crown, but how a bastard became immortal. Illegitimacy in the Middle Ages was a curse that clung like a brand. William was born around 1028 in Falaise, the son of Robert, Duke of Normandy, and Herleva, the daughter of a humble tanner. She was not his wife, merely his mistress, and for that, William would be mocked as the bastard for the rest of his life. But the insult was more than words. To many nobles, being illegitimate meant William should never inherit, never sit on a ducal throne. He was a target, a child caught in a wolf's den. When William was just 7, his father died suddenly on pilgrimage. Overnight, the boy became Duke of Normandy. But Normandy was no stable land. It was a storm of rival barons, mercenaries, and blood feuds. A child duke was the weakest prey imaginable. Chaos followed. His guardians were assassinated one after another. Knights switched sides at the hint of profit. Even his own life was under constant threat. On more than one night, William had to be smuggled from his bed and hidden in peasant houses to escape men who wanted his head. This crucible of fear and betrayal forged him. William learned that kindness meant nothing without force, that oaths were dust unless backed by steel. By his teens, he was already more warlord than boy. When rebellion rose, he crushed it with merciless efficiency. He rewarded those who stood by him, but made brutal examples of traitors. Step by bloody step, the bastard secured Normandy, building a reputation as a ruler too ruthless to challenge. Yet even as he tightened his grip at home, William's eyes looked outward. Across the Channel lay England, richer, larger, divided, and vulnerable. He believed he had a claim to its throne. But as you'll soon see, in medieval politics, a claim was worthless without the sword to enforce it. England in the mid-11th century was a kingdom teetering on uncertainty. Edward the Confessor, a pious but childless king, lay dying. With no heir of his own blood, his throne became the greatest prize in Europe. 3 men stepped forward. Harold Godwinson, the most powerful earl in England. Harald Hardrada, the Viking king of Norway. William of Normandy, who claimed Edward had promised him the crown years earlier. But when Edward finally died in January 1066, the Witan, England's Council of Nobles, wasted no time. They crowned Harold king. To the English, he was strong, competent, and most importantly, theirs. To William, it was nothing short of betrayal. He swore Harold had once promised to support his claim. And in William's mind, a broken oath was more than an insult. It was grounds for war. And so, while England celebrated Harold's coronation, across the sea a bastard duke began sharpening his sword. But Harold would not only face William. First, he had to confront a storm from the north. The year 1066 was a year carved in blood. Even before William set sail, England was already bleeding. From the north came Harald Hardrada, the last great Viking king, a man born in the shadow of Odin and hardened by decades of war. With a fleet of longships, he descended on England like a storm. Harold Godwinson, the new Saxon king, had no choice. He gathered his huscarls, his levies, his men fresh from the fields, and marched them north with desperate speed. What followed at Stamford Bridge was one of the most brutal battles of the age. Under a burning September sun, swords clashed, shields splintered, and the Viking dream of England died in heaps of blood and iron. Hardrada was slain, his army shattered. But it was no triumph without cost. Harold's men were exhausted, many wounded, their numbers thinned. The king himself had barely a moment to breathe when a darker threat loomed. For across the Channel, William of Normandy was waiting. This was no reckless gamble. William had prepared with precision. He secured the Pope's blessing, flying a banner of holy approval that cast his invasion as not just a war for power, but a crusade ordained by God. He gathered not only his Norman knights, but Bretons, Flemish fighters, and mercenaries from every corner, men promised plunder, land, and glory. His fleet, hundreds of ships strong, set sail under autumn skies. The Channel, often a shield for England, betrayed Harold this time. Winds shifted, tides favored William. The bastard landed first at Pevensey, then at Hastings, where he built wooden fortifications as if daring Harold to strike. And strike Harold did. Despite exhaustion, despite the wounds still fresh from Stamford Bridge, he forced his men to march south in punishing haste. They covered miles upon miles, leaving behind only the burnt bodies of Hardrada's Vikings as they trudged toward their next fate. Every step was a race against time. Harold knew that if William entrenched himself too deeply, if he gained allies in the south, England could be lost forever. On the morning of October 14th, destiny arrived. Two armies faced each other, one battered but desperate, the other disciplined and hungry for conquest. The ground at Hastings was more than a battlefield. It was the stage where Saxon England would either survive or vanish into legend. But before I take you into the slaughter, consider this. Without this single clash, the entire history of England, its monarchy, its language, its culture, would look nothing like it does today. Which brings us at last to the moment of destiny. Dawn broke cold and grim. On Senlac Hill, Harold's men, mostly infantry, farmers, and huscarls, formed a shield wall, an iron wall of bodies and shields. Below them, William's Normans waited with cavalry, archers, and infantry, their banners snapping in the wind. The first Norman assaults crashed against the Saxon shield wall and broke. The English stood firm, hacking down knights and spearmen. William himself was thrown from his horse at one point, and rumors spread that he had been killed. To keep his men from breaking, William tore off his helmet, shouting, "Look at me, I live!" But William was not just brave, he was cunning. He ordered a feigned retreat. Some of Harold's men, thinking the Normans were fleeing, broke ranks to chase them. At that moment, the cavalry wheeled around, cutting them down. Wave after wave weakened the shield wall, and then came the moment of legend, Harold's death. The Bayeux Tapestry shows an arrow piercing his eye, a brutal, poetic symbol of fate. But other accounts claim he was hacked down by Norman knights, his body mutilated beyond recognition. However it happened, Harold fell, and with him fell Saxon England. By nightfall, William stood victorious on the field of Hastings. The bastard had killed a king. But killing Harold was only the beginning. Conquering England would demand something far darker. The road to London was not a march of triumph. It was a trail of ruin. Everywhere the Normans passed, villages went up in flames. Livestock was seized, fields trampled, and survivors fled into the forests like hunted animals. Smoke blackened the sky, a grim signal that the bastard's conquest had begun. By December, William reached London, and on Christmas Day, 1066, he was crowned in Westminster Abbey. Yet even this moment of supposed glory unfolded in chaos. Inside, bishops raised their voices, chanting in Latin. Outside, Norman guards heard the shouting and mistook it for rebellion. In a panic, they set fire to houses around the abbey. Smoke seeped into the holy place, while the new king trembled before his own army's violence. It was a coronation sealed not with peace, but with fire. The years that followed offered no relief. England did not bow willingly. From Kent to York, rebellion smoldered. Anglo-Saxon nobles plotted in the shadows, their people rising again and again against the foreign king. William's answer was terror. Nowhere was it darker than in the north. There, in 1069, uprisings challenged his rule. William's retaliation became infamous, the harrying of the north. His men burned villages, slaughtered livestock, and salted the earth. Crops were destroyed just before winter. Tens of thousands starved. Chroniclers wrote that bodies lay unburied in the fields, the stench of death spreading across Yorkshire. The message was unmistakable: resist, and your land would be turned into a graveyard. But William was not only a destroyer, he was a builder of control. To secure his new realm, he began raising castles, stone and timber monsters that dominated the horizon. Towers at strategic points, fortresses in rebellious towns, garrisons where Saxons once felt safe. These were not mere buildings, they were symbols of submission, foreign teeth sunk deep into English soil. Yet even William understood that fear alone could not hold a kingdom. He had to weave England into a new order, an order stamped with Norman law, Norman lords, and Norman language. To rule forever, he could not just burn England, he had to remake it in his own image. And that is where his legacy begins. The legacy of a bastard who would conquer not only a crown, but the very soul of a nation. Which brings us to his chilling legacy. William's reign did not just change the throne, it changed the DNA of England itself. He introduced castles, stone monsters of power that still scar the landscape. He imposed Norman law, reshaping justice to fit his iron will. He commissioned the Domesday Book, a vast survey that recorded every field, every village, every ox in England, a ledger of domination. And perhaps most lastingly, he changed the very language of England. The mingling of Norman French and Old English became the root of modern English, the words you are hearing right now. From bastard to conqueror, William rewrote not just his own destiny, but the destiny of a nation. So was he a rightful king, or just a bastard who murdered and stole? Perhaps the truth is both. He was the man who killed the Saxon king, and in that act, he forged a kingdom that still endures nearly 1,000 years later. Before we end, if you've been drawn into this dark tale of ambition, betrayal, and conquest, make sure to like this video, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell. That way, you'll never miss the stories we uncover. Stories where history's shadows hide the bloodiest truths. And if you're ready for the next descent into history's dark corridors, click the video now appearing on your screen. Because if William's conquest shook England, the next story will show you how betrayal shook an empire,